All right, folks, it's Donald Trump cooking the books. The June jobs report is out, and it's weird. The U.S. economy, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, added 147,000 jobs last month, beating expectations. Unemployment rate dipped to 4.1%, the lowest since February. Most of the gains came from, guess what, government hiring, state and local, especially in education. The private sector added just 74,000 jobs, its weakest showing in months. And the federal government actually lost 7,000 jobs, continuing a year of deep cuts. Now, we're going to go beneath the numbers. Joining us right now to break it all down, Morgan Harper, Director of Policy and Advocacy at the American Economic Liberties Project. Okay, so Morgan, now I'm confused because we had the, what is it? Is it ADP? Their numbers before a day before saying loss of 33,000 jobs. Now this, and I've seen people posting on social media. I even saw an item where Bloomberg called out these numbers as being fudged. Can you explain us what the hell's going on?
Well, I don't know if I even have full information on that. I mean, I have not seen that Bloomberg story. We don't, of course, know fully what's happening within the Trump administration. But I do think that it's possible that there's some discrepancies, and this does happen in other months too, some discrepancy between what the ADP figures are predicting and that we ultimately end up seeing from the government data. So, hard to say for sure, but I think even if we are taking these numbers at face value, and like you said, Roland, they are showing some increase in job creation numbers, if we look below the hood, there's plenty to be concerned about and could be signs of future trouble.
So explain.
Okay, so for example, a few things to note, because like I said, there's a lot. One, people who are unemployed are staying unemployed longer. That's disconcerting because now it's like you're trying to find a job, but you're not able to get one. Problematic. Two, the manufacturing jobs continue to go down. So you noted that a lot of the job growth is in public sector, local, state government, education, even healthcare. That's not usually private sector either. A lot of nonprofit hospitals, for example, things like that. We're not seeing the gains in the private sector. That's the whole theory of the case for them, is they're bringing back manufacturing and rebuilding America and all of this. Well, this is the second month in a row where we've seen multi-thousands of manufacturing job losses. And, we noted, it's not across a lot of different industries. The average number of hours that people are working is also going down. And of course, it's possible people are voluntarily trying to work less, or summertime, maybe things with kids and who knows, but it could be a sign, and I think a lot of people are wondering if it is a sign that people, again, are not able to work as much as they want. So they are still employed, but they're just not able to get as many hours in, schedule as many shifts as they would like. And importantly, Black unemployment is rising. So even though overall unemployment is still staying pretty steady, in these numbers, from this past month, Black unemployment going up. And, and those fluctuate a lot. We've talked about that. So we'll just have to see how it all gets adjusted. But that is, the other take on some of these job numbers beyond the headline. The other thing I would note is there's a whole category of knockoff effects that are happening throughout, because of other policy decisions or other indicators that might not be directly connected to this jobs data that comes out every month, but are also signs of trouble. And that would include things like layoffs. Microsoft, for example, just announced that they're going to have I think this is their third round of layoffs over the last few months. This latest round, 9,000 people that are going to be laid off in Microsoft. A lot of the tech companies have done layoffs, and we're starting to see, more of this, not just in tech, but also in other industries as well. We don't need to explain that. Layoffs are not good and mean less money in people's pockets. And based on some of those other factors we were just discussing, it might be harder for people to bounce back if there isn't as much private sector hiring going on. And actually, I think the job cuts we're seeing, it's among the highest levels of layoffs, job cuts we've seen since the pandemic. But as we know, the pandemic was a very unique time. So to be getting anywhere close to starting to match what was going on during the pandemic could be just the beginning of the brewing of an economic crisis.
And of course, we see tariffs. You have the chair of the Federal Reserve, Chairman Powell, who has said that they would have cut rates by now if Donald Trump's tariffs were not going to go into effect. And again, you got Republicans who are sitting here just crowing and how great and wonderful these things are. We saw what happened today with this bill that was passed that's going to be signed into law tomorrow. And we've already had one hospital in Nebraska announce they're going to shut down because of what's happening with Medicaid. And so while they are cheering and proclaiming things are wonderful, we are about to have a serious economic problem.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, the tariffs we talked about, that still just continues to be a huge source of uncertainty. And look, I mean, that connects to why we're not seeing more job growth in private sector. A lot of private sector companies are just saying, we can't move in this environment. We don't know where things are headed. Even if they don't keep all of the tariffs, the increase in certain level of tariffs is going to impact their ability to maybe replace some of their supply, given that we're not seeing the administration pair these tariffs with domestic investment and diversify the types of suppliers that are available. And you're absolutely right, Roland. I mean, the big bill, I'm not going to use the term beautiful because, I mean, it's actually offensive to even apply that word to what's going on here. These are really aggressive cuts that are going to hit at the heart of not just people's economic lives, but actually their whole existence and as human beings. With some of the cuts that are happening to healthcare, and that's going to have a big impact too. Premiums likely to go up. We could see further consolidation in the insurance industry. That is never a good thing for bottom line access to healthcare and also controlling costs. And then the immigration. What are they choosing to fund? Choosing to fund ICE to the tune of $46 billion. Well, again, you can take the humanity point at it, and a lot of they said that they're going after people who are criminals, but I think we all have seen now that it's gone way beyond that, including picking up some people who are American citizens and their raids and all of that. Real chilling effect on workers, and then, getting to the economic impact, workers wanting to even show up. A lot of towns at this point, here in Ohio where I am, across the country, the immigrant population is the engine of the economy. And so if we have people, even if they're still here, they're scared to even leave their homes because of some of this ICE funding, well, we're not going to see the amount of labor that's needed to keep up some of our food supply and all of these things. And that could have detrimental effects as well and increase a lot of the costs that we face as consumers down the line. Will all of this happen right away? The impacts? No. But again, it does continue to feel like we just have this ticking time bomb. And that it's not if we will have some kind of economic downturn, it's when.
I want to bring in my panel while we're having this economic discussion. Let me bring them in right now. Dr. Nola Haynes, Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, joining us from D.C. Dr. Greg Carr, Department of Afro-American Studies, Howard University out of D.C. Eugene Craig, CEO, X Factor Media, Inc., out of Baltimore. The thing here, and I want to start. I want to start with you, Eugene. We saw what happened today. The passing of this bill. Only 2 Republicans voted no. 10 Republicans voted no. They held the vote open for a very long time in order to procure those 2 votes. They wanted this bill to be voted upon in the dead of the night, but Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries said, nah, that ain't gonna happen. Y'all gonna have to sit here and listen to all of this. I'm gonna play some of that later in the show. And again, they're jumping up and down saying how this is just going to create this new golden era of economics in the United States, but they are actually putting this economy in peril with their actions.
Yeah, so I'll say this, right? I don't know if you're coming to me. I had a disconnection for a second.
Yes, you.
The thing is this, Roland. They're putting the economy in peril. The Fed chair has already said that we would have lowered interest rates if not for tariffs, right? And the one thing that's definitely going to come out of this is an increase in tariff, is an increase in interest rates. Because, hey, we're going to run deficits, we're going to run debt up, and the debt's going to be monetized. Part of the issue that Republicans take advantage of every single time they get power is that the American public doesn't understand the relationship between government spending, taxes, and how that affects their everyday lives when it comes to things like, hey, your interest rate that you're going to pay for your mortgage, or interest rate for your credit card, or interest rate that you're going to pay on your car payment, or the lack of interest rate that you're going to get on your savings, right? And how inflation itself is an invisible interest rate that you may not see on paper, but you feel every single day. And so the austerity that was just passed today is going to head to the president's desk is going to do nothing but hurt the American people. Shout out to Congressman Massey and Congressman Fitzpatrick. It must be noted, Brian comes from a pure purple district and voted, his conscience to protect his constituents. Talking about Brian Fitzpatrick. Also of note, that's where we held our second and final Republicans for Harris rally in his district. So he comes from a district that Vice President Harris won. But the rest of the Republican caucus, shame on them. The members from North Carolina and Georgia and Alabama, there isn't a Republican member whose constituents is not going to be directly affected by this. But, in their eyes, because, hey, a lot of these cuts don't take place in 2026, they think it's all, fun and dandy, and then that they can blame the Democrats when they come into effect. But at the end of the day, they voted to harm the people that put them in power and office.
The thing here, as we look at what has happened, and Nola, as I said, this hospital in Nebraska, rural area in the district of Nebraska, Congressman Don Bacon, who announced that he was not going to be seeking re-election. So he didn't owe Donald Trump anything. So what did he do? He voted for the bill. Already, this hospital leader saying, sorry, Medicaid cuts, there's no way we survive. Those people now are not going to be able to have health care there. This is the reality, what we're dealing with. That is going to be detrimental to the economy.
Absolutely. And we've seen this pattern before. I remember being home in New Orleans for the Mardi Gras when COVID was happening, but the first Trump administration decided to tell Louisiana, to tell New Orleans that it was safe for Mardi Gras to go ahead. And a month and a half later, 14 members of my family died. So we have a pattern where Trump thinks that if you pretend that the thing isn't happening, or if you shove it in a box long enough, you can somehow be delusional enough and convince other people to be delusional as if the thing isn't happening. With the jobs report, listen, something is very fishy here. As an academic, I can tell you across the board, there are hiring freezes. I cannot tell you how many emails Georgetown have sent talking about we don't know what's going to happen. I have friends across the country from UCLA, USC, Harper, you name it. There are hiring freezes and there's a lot of uncertainty and people are losing their jobs or hours are being cut back. And I can tell you, as someone who just recently separated from Department of State, where over 3,000 people are on a chopping block for losing their jobs across the federal government, people have lost their jobs. So something isn't adding up here. Now, one thing that I did hear about the jobs report is part of that number are them bringing people back on that Doge fired. I don't know if that's true or not, but there's so many stories going on about the jobs report, but I'm telling you from my own experience, and this isn't, and I have the data sitting in my emails, something isn't adding up. People have lost their jobs, will continue to lose their jobs, but somehow we're adding jobs to education and to the federal government. Something is fishy.
To that particular point, Morgan, look, we know I put nothing past this administration. Now, normally what happens when job numbers are revised up or down, that's based upon when new data comes in. And we've seen that happen before. And so earlier when you said we've seen it before where there's a discrepancy between ADP and the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers. How does that happen? Why does that happen? Just give us that understanding.
Yeah, and I might need to get even more information on that, but I agree with the main point that we don't know what we don't know, and when we look at what Congress could join, I do think that this is something worth inquiry. In addition to trying to speak out about the bill, it's like this is the time to be demanding specific investigations. That is another tool that Congress has to be able to have them show their work, right? But I mean, based on, and again, I want to see some of the sources that you're referencing, Roland, but based on what we know on the data that's available, I don't know that there's evidence of cooking the books, but I completely agree with all the trends that we're seeing. There have been a lot of job losses. And if there's something going on with what data is actually being released to the public and it's not in its accuracy, then we need to be ringing the alarm on that really quickly. But at the end of the day, here's another thing that we should probably all be focused on doing is showing the impacts already that are being felt. And I think we're seeing this. You know, food banks are already having a hard time keeping up with demand, and they know that they're not going to be able to continue to get the same level of resources that they've received before. Roland, you were referencing, you know, the rural hospital that's announced that they're going to close. I mean, there are a lot of institutions across the country that rely almost exclusively, if not majority, on Medicaid patients, and knowing that those resources aren't going to be available. So uplifting those stories, telling what the impacts are, and how it doesn't necessarily jive with the official picture that's being presented by the government data, again, whether true or completely accurate or not, I think is going to be very, very important as quickly as we can.
You know, Greg, what was really interesting here, when you talk about this particular bill, Republicans put a lot of this stuff to hit in 2027 after the 2026 midterms. To Morgan's point right here, but we know there are immediate things going. This, for everybody who's been saying, well, the Democrats, they're flailing, they have no message. The reality is they do now have one. They now have something where they can say what we are for and what the people are against based on what they've already done. And we heard that in Leader Jeffrey's speech. And I'm going to unpack that a little bit further when we actually run that. But people have to understand, you know, Trump has already said, hey, I've got more power. He controls Republicans with an iron fist. But this is a moment where Democrats are going to have to be nailing every day who this hurts, who gets impacted, and every time a hospital or a nursing home shuts down, they should pin that on Donald Trump, Speaker Mike Johnson, and every single Republican that voted for this bill.
They absolutely should, Roland. The response from the white nationalists will be, they're eating the dogs. In other words, this is not logic. Never underestimate the power of white supremacy. As Joni Ernst, Senator Ernst said, everybody dies. They would rather die than save their own lives if it means that somebody else gets some health care. And so, yes, the Democrats do have a message. And yes, Leader Jeffrey spoke for an impassioned almost 9 hours today. Yes, he broke a record. And then they voted the way they were going to vote anyway. I don't give any credit to Fitzpatrick. Thomas Massey, who built his house with his own hands, is always going to do what he's going to do. He ain't scared of them. Fitzpatrick, after voting to advance voting to advance legislation, left the House floor in the middle of the night. Why? He know he's not going to win re-election. He need to roll over these white nationalists like the sea. Morgan, you know, as an economist, I really wonder what your thoughts are at the macroeconomic level about the United States. Thomas Flat Earth Friedman wrote in today's New York Times, as this bill passed, he said, can you hear it? That loud roar coming from the east? It's the sound of 1.4 billion Chinese laughing at us. Because in that bill, they're trying to revert to coal and all that at the same time that the world is moving forward with electric, with solar, with wind. And so what do you think about the jobs of the future, the U.S. economy of the future, as countries all over the world, Brazil and Mexico met this week, the EU trying to work it out with England, are looking for workarounds. Canada talking about it might be an energy superpower in the near future. As the world begins to work around the United States of America, what do you think is on the horizon as Musk's electric vehicles crater in sales? If you go to Dubai, if you go to Malaysia, what's on the streets? BYD, the Chinese car. I mean, what does the future of the American economy and the American worker look like with the passage of this bill?
I can't say that anyone thinks the future is looking strong based on what's coming out of this bill, and there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, even like I referenced earlier, that we're seeing tech companies announce all these layoffs. A lot of them they're saying are the result of AI, and it's just kind of the natural evolution of how things have to go based on how technology is developing. No, I mean that's been a fundamental problem in our country for a while, at least a few decades, that we're just kind of taking a lot of these companies at their word or letting them set the terms. And so we are in a situation of having kind of like private governments with these very large companies that now have been able to buy off the government, and then it's kind of game over. So that's a dynamic at play. I think also, just this level of like whiplash in policy making. I mean, you can't plan a society for the future if you're disinvesting in education, if you don't have people that are healthy. And so there's really no way to look at what's coming out of this bill and think, oh, great, this is really setting us up very well to be competitive globally. And I agree with you. I mean, I think a lot of other parts of the world are starting to discount how much leadership they'll see out of the United States for the foreseeable future. And, there's still potentially time to change course, but maybe not a lot of time, because with these types of cuts, with this lack of investment, with this lack of a plan, with this level of corruption, it might not be that easy to flip the switch, even if we do see a change in power, the new administration in a few years, or a change in the dynamics in Congress.
Well, here's a perfect example. I'm sitting here. Politico has this story right here. It says conservatives say Trump won their mega bill votes by promising crackdown on renewable energy credits. Texas Congressman Chip Roy said, quote, "We believe we're going to get 90+% of all future projects terminated." Morgan, to the point that Greg was just stating, is simple. Where in the hell do you think the building is coming from? Where in the hell do you think the new jobs are coming? That's why the trade union, that's why the electrical workers were opposing this, saying, are you guys stupid? You've got companies that were announcing $400 and $500 million expansion projects. We sit here complaining about the Chinese dominating. America created the solar energy. Solar panels are an American invention, and they're just like, yo, China, y'all going right ahead. I saw a story earlier that said, let me see, I want to double check. I think it was in Norway. New car. I think it said that 97% of all new cars in Norway were electric vehicles. And yeah, right here in Norway, 90% of new cars sold in 2024 were fully electric, with the country aiming for all new cars sold by 2025 to be zero emission. Now, here's what's hilarious, Morgan. These right-wingers go, oh, electric vehicles, man, that's hurting the power grid. What's sucking up the power grid? These AI plants.
The data centers.
Right. So, for the data centers. So for people to sit here and for these Republicans to say, oh, we should stop, forget all these electric vehicle stuff. I'm like, y'all are on crack, and the crack you're on are fossil fuels. The reality, I've got General Motors is delivering on Monday to me an electric vehicle. We have to understand that this is real simple. You have to recognize where the future is. This bill and Republicans, Morgan, they only think and operate in the now. They don't give a damn about the next 10, 20, 30 years. And yeah, we're going to be in for a serious issue if the rest of the world says, okay, America, we know you are the largest economy in the world at $29 trillion. But we don't have to actually do stuff with you. If we partner with one another, we can bypass you. And that's going to be happening a whole lot over the next 3 years.
Yeah, I think a couple of comments. I mean, one, the big tech data center situation, it absolutely impacts electricity. I mean, they're cutting these deals. They're going to raise electricity prices, but trying to spread the cost of that across all of us and individual ratepayers, not just themselves. And that is a huge problem and going to increase costs for people. And also water on the data centers extract a lot of water. And that's another part of the utility story that isn't always talked about, but increased water bills for people, getting shut off, not having access to basic services. Does that sound like a modern country to any of us? I don't think so. And so, again, like beyond the economic perspective, it's just like the real inhumanity of what they're doing is really tough to fully portray just the risk that it's creating for a lot of Americans in the future at all income levels. It's like, even if you feel like you're pretty good now, these are just going to continue to have ripple effects that I think will hit a lot of different economic classes. And yeah, I mean, it's very easy now for, I mean, it'll be an adjustment even for some of these countries to want to coordinate amongst themselves, but the incentive to do so is very easy to calculate. You cannot rely on the United States. I mean, not having people feel comfortable coming here to do research. That's always been one of the top benefits of coming to the U.S., having international people that either come and gain knowledge and have a great impression of the U.S. and go back wherever they're from, or come and love the education they got here and invest in starting businesses and hiring people. We're going to lose that. Investing in research and to create innovation even within the government. A lot of the private sector is just not incentivized to have the resources to do that, front loading of research and development to create the next great healthcare breakthrough or some kind of new technology. But why do we have the internet now? It's because there was government investment along the way that allowed engineers and scientists to be able to invest in that, learning and understanding that technology. The private sector is never going to do that in the same way. And so, this is potentially setting us back for a long, long time. And it's just a clear corporate giveaway, even things that don't seem like they're big corporate giveaways. Going back to the immigration issue, what is a lot of this funding going to go towards? Detention centers. Who owns detention centers? The same people that are operating prisons. And this is not actually investing in any communities. And it's just a complete giveaway to folks that already have a lot and are only going to get more.
To that particular point, Nola, that people have to recognize, when you start having countries begin to align and work together economically, then that has an impact also military. That then impacts foreign policy. And so people need to understand that they may look at this bill and look at the actions of these Republicans only through the terms of America's interests, but the world is watching what happened today. They'll be watching when this bill is signed tomorrow. They will see how Donald Trump has shown that the Republican Party is utterly feckless. They are unwilling to hold him accountable. They're allowing him to do whatever it is they want to do. So the world is watching and seeing that there literally are no Republican guardrails to stop a madman from doing whatever it is that he wants to do. And they are going to respond. And it's not going to be the way that we think it always has been with our so-called allies.
Absolutely. The world is watching. And in many countries around the world, they have great health care. I've been sick multiple times in different countries and left those hospitals without having to pay a bill as a non-citizen. And here we are stripping very vulnerable people of their health care. And to your point, Roland, I'm glad that you kind of drew the intersection between what happened today with that bill and also with our insecurity. What's very clear to me is that this administration is not interested in being the leader of anything other than in defense, right? And we saw an example of that when they bombed the 3 nuclear facilities in Iran. The next day, Hegseth said, deterrence is back. So that tells me as a professional, as a security and defense professional, oh, okay, so we're doing away with diplomacy. We said screw you to our allies and our partners. And we think that having the biggest, baddest military, which we already do, but to have it even bigger and even badder, then that's going to be the answer to everything. That we are going to scare people into some sort of submission versus wanting to do the things to lead in climate, to lead in energy, to lead in human rights. We have completely walked away from all of our values in favor of deterrence. So, what that is going to do, that's going to increase an arms race around the world. And there's already evidence of this happening. You know, in space, where I spend most of my day in space security, we are going to see a huge buildup, an arms race in space, and that's also going to happen here on Earth. So all of these things, they snowball, right? So, okay, so we can't trust the United States. We can't partner with them. They're no longer our allies. Therefore, now we have to think about defense and offense in a way that, you know, insert country hadn't thought about before. Look at what this administration did with Ukraine. They completely sidestepped Congress and refused to send Ukraine the weapons that was already allocated to send to Ukraine. We are beyond the pale here. No one can trust us. Who's going to want to do business with us? And the last thing I will say is the one thing that this administration has done, as it's done many things in its 6 months, it has now positioned China to be the number one superpower in the world. Yes, I said it.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to tell you why.
Absolutely.
Because
That's right.
they understand the gap, the diplomacy gap that we've left.
That's right.
And they are absolutely stepping into that gap. Now, they may have, you know, their own their end goals in mind. Every country does. But Donald Trump has ceded all ground to China. I said what I said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where Roland go?
Well, Eugene, these are, first of all, I'm right here.
I didn't see that.
You done? Eugene, there are far-reaching implications, and I just want people to understand that the economic piece we're talking about goes directly in line with military, with national security, all of those different things. And the world is recognizing, the world sees how shameful and dangerous, how much of a liar this man is. They forced Zelensky to sign a mineral rights deal, and now they're denying them weapons. And the whole point of the deal was to continue to supply weapons. The world will not be trusting the United States. The world will not believe things that we say economically. And folks had better understand and be prepared for that to happen.
And look, Europe's responding, very strongly. They've decided that, hey, instead of relying on the American military-industrial complex to supply us with bombs and planes and ships and everything else, the EU said, look, we're going to build ourselves a bigger army, a better army, and we're also going to produce our own weapons. That's going to have a direct economic impact on American jobs here. One of the things that's often explained nowadays is, a lot of the aid that goes to Ukraine or goes to, any conflict that we decide to support on one side or the other is that, that's not necessarily money being dropped into those countries. It's, hey, the United States, the Pentagon essentially buying resources from American companies that are then supplying them to these regions in the world, whether it's Ukraine or, conflicts in Africa or wherever. That's going to, so when Europe and other affiliate countries are deciding that they're going to produce their own rather than purchase from us, that's going to have a direct effect on American jobs, on American, military producers, folk that make bombs, folk that make bullets, and everything else in between. And it's a direct reflection of Donald Trump being in office. It's a direct reflection of the lack of leadership coming out of the current American presidency. And it's a direct reflection of the rest of the world having to stand up and stand in the gap in real time. I actually thought, when Representative Sparks voted against the rule last night, I actually thought her vote was going to hold because, hey, her sole issue is Ukraine, and they're cutting funding to Ukraine, while at the same time, playing games with the weapons after forcing Zelensky to sign the minerals bill. I thought that she was going to hold. I was wrong. I guess at the end of the day, Donald Trump gets what he wants.
Well, Morgan, this thing is real. And again, folks just need to understand what we're going to be facing. And so it's a lot we're going to be unpacking once this bill gets signed. And then we start seeing the absolutely, and I'll say this and I'm not being hyperbolic, this bill is going to drop an economic nuclear bomb on America, especially rural America, and be prepared for the orange and white tears to be flowing, because they're going to be looking like a bunch of those Latinos who were Latinos for Trump and saying, I didn't think he was talking about me.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.